When players are practicing, I often will see in training that they will just kick the ball away when it comes to them. And my response, and when I talk to the players, is simply this, is that we do not have to practice our skills. We don't have to practice dribbling. We don't have to practice receiving the ball and passing the ball or learning how to strike a ball on goal if the only thing we want to do is just kick the ball away when it comes to them. Because it requires no skill. There's no reason to practice all those things we're trying to do in the game if we're not going to try to actually do them in the game. When a ball comes to a player and they just kick it, they immediately take themselves back down to the most basic level of the game. Someone who's never touched a soccer ball or never stepped on a soccer field before in their lives, I could bring onto the field and have them just kick the ball forward as hard as possible. That doesn't require really any practice at all. So as players, I say it doesn't make a ton of sense for us to practice, to work on our dribbling, to work on our receiving and passing, if we're not willing to try it when we're actually playing. Because that's why you practice. You practice those so when we step in the game, we can try to do them. It won't always work, but that's the reason we practice. We practice them so we can try them in the games and learn from it. But when you just kick the ball, when it comes to you and there's no thought and we just whack it forward as hard as possible, you immediately take everything you've practiced and you just kind of throw it out the window. There's no value to it anymore because you've immediately taken yourself back to the start, to the first time you touched the ball. Again, anyone can just kick the ball forward. That requires no skill at all. So anyone that just steps on the field the first time can do that. So as players, we have to kind of understand that, and we have to kind of make that clear for them that that's why we practice. There's no reason to practice if we're actually not going to do that when we step on the field. We're not going to try to dribble. We're not going to try to receive the ball. We're not going to try to pass. We're not going to make decisions, because if we're not going to do that, then just practice is a waste of time. Just why practice something if you have no intention of using it? And with that said, as coaches and parents, we have to be very careful then when kids are playing, when we tell them just kick it or boot it or clear it. When we do that, we're kind of saying that, hey, everything we just practiced and we worked on, we don't want you to do that. And then when we get to practice, we try to tell them, hey, this is important. We need to really focus on our dribbling and receiving and passing. But then in the game, we tell them just to kick it. So it's also our responsibility as adults, as the coaches and parents, that we're not confusing the player. On one hand, we're saying, hey, practice, we have to work on these things. And then when you get to the game, we're saying, hey, don't do it. So then when the player's at practice and doesn't really focus or want to do it, at that point, I can't blame them. I was like, because why practice it if I'm not going to allow them to do it in the game? So from the player's standpoint, we have to make sure they understand that we want to see them use the skills that we're practicing in training, because if they don't, then it's just there's no point of doing it. But then we also can't send the wrong message and be hypocritical that we're telling them this stuff in training is important, and then when they get to the game, they can never use it. So make sure that we are encouraging players to use their skill, because that's why we practice. If we want them to get on the field and just kick the ball forward as hard as possible every time it comes to them, there's really no reason to have practice or to train. All we really need to do is just show up at the game, because that is not very hard to explain, to tell kids, hey, when the ball comes, we just want you to kick it as hard as possible in that direction and run after it. When you get to it again, do it again. Or if we want them to be soccer players and develop their skills and learn, we have to ask them to use the skills that they're using in training.